If you're smoking weed and you think you're depressed, watch this video. You're not smoking weed because you're depressed. It's the weed that's causing the depression. A lot of people don't know this, but weed kind of screws up your brain chemistry. And I'll explain that a bit later, but it really messes up your brain chemistry to the point where you can think you're depressed. So I used to be one of the biggest addicts I know. Just a bit of background about me. I used to be one of the biggest weed addicts I've ever known. I used to be a fiend. I was smoking 4 or 5 times a day. I was smoking before school, after school. And this is when I was this is when I was a teenager too. So that's probably not a good time to get into smoking. So it definitely really messed up my development as like a human being, I guess you could say, some sort of development in my brain. But yeah, anyways, I used to be one of the biggest addicts I've ever known. And it got to the point where I really thought that I didn't think I was depressed because I didn't really know what that was, or I didn't know what that felt like. But I really just felt like an emotionless zombie. That's the best way I could describe it, is that when I was walking around, I kind of just felt like an emotionless zombie, especially when I was not high. But I didn't know because I was so young. When I was in high school, like I was like, oh, this is just what people feel like. This is what normal people feel like. Like I would walk around school pretty much not talking to anyone. I wouldn't want to talk to anyone. The only thing I wanted to do was just be to myself, smoke weed, and just, yeah, I was just really socially isolated, I guess you could say. I didn't want to talk to anyone. I didn't want to talk to my family. I didn't want to talk to anyone. I also felt as if things weren't as funny as they were before. So I remember when I was a kid, I used to laugh a lot. I used to be such a big laugher. I used to laugh at the smallest things. I used to joke around a lot. But after I started smoking weed, I just never really laughed that much, you know? It kind of felt as if the color was sucked out of life a bit. It felt like I was seeing life through like a black and white lens. It kind of felt like I kind of lost my vibrance, I guess you could say, my childlike vibrance. So I started smoking weed when I was 17, and I remember this was when I was in grade 11. That's when I really started getting into smoking weed. And before that, like I was a super talkative person, you know, like I was talking to all my friends and that sort of stuff. But the only people I wanted to talk to were the friends that smoked weed because they were the only people who could match my energy, I guess you could say. Everyone just had a bit more, they just had a bit too much energy for me, you know what I'm saying? So I only want to talk to the more mellow people who I could relate to because they were mellow as well and chill as well. But also when you smoke, it kind of feels like you can't really enjoy things as much. You can't really watch a movie. You can't really enjoy a movie unless you're high. You can't really walk around and go to the mall unless you're high. You can't really eat food unless you're high. Things aren't as enjoyable as they were when you were a kid. Because think about it, when you were a kid, the newest experiences were the best thing ever. It's kind of like you would drive to, I don't know, some sort of the vacation spot or something like that, or some sort of cool place, and you'd be like, yo, this is sick. Just the drive there was just a super sick experience. Or even trying some sort of new food, or going to the park. Something like going to the park, and now that you, like, if you really look back at it, the parks are kind of boring, you know what I'm saying? But yeah, just new experiences like that gave you the most amount of joy. But after I started smoking weed, I just stopped caring about these new experiences. Like, oh, I would go to, I don't know, I'd go to Quebec with my family. Yeah, I don't care. You know, I just want to smoke weed. I didn't care about anything unless weed was involved. Now, a lot of people who are smoking weed that feel this way, they smoke more because they think it's making them better. They think that there's something wrong in their brain because there actually is something wrong with their brain, but it's not depression. It's not actually depression. They think they have depression because they feel those sort of emotions or they feel that sort of way. But no, I can guarantee you it is not any form of depression. Your brain chemistry is just messed up from smoking all the weed. So I'll explain why. A lot of people don't know this. No one really talks about this when it comes to smoking weed. This isn't like a known thing, and I'm trying to make this become a known thing because I literally gone through this. But when you smoke weed, it screws up your brain chemistry because what's happening is you're pumping your brain with a bunch of feel-good chemicals like dopamine and serotonin. And when you unnaturally, artificially induce some sort of chemical within your brain stops naturally producing it. It becomes more dull. It becomes less receptive to those actual things. So dopamine, for example. Dopamine is the chemical in your brain that's responsible for motivation, feeling good. It's kind of known as the feel-good chemical, but it kind of more so works on motivation. So, for example, when you eat good food, your brain spikes in dopamine. When you go talk to someone, your brain spikes in dopamine. When you get natural sunlight, your brain spikes in dopamine. Anything that is meant to help you survive, your brain spikes dopamine when you're going to pursue that thing because it gives you the motivation to go ahead and pursue that thing. So that's why it's known as the feel-good chemical. So what happens when you smoke weed is you skyrocket your dopamine levels. You spike your dopamine levels like crazy. you spike it to the point where it's like unnatural. So your brain isn't naturally designed to handle that amount of dopamine spikes, especially if you smoke a lot of weed, which a lot of people do, especially the guys who smoke bongs and whatever. That's beside the point. But yes, your brain spikes in dopamine to a super high amount. But what happens if you unnaturally spike your dopamine? What happens is your dopamine spikes and then it crashes down below its natural baseline. So let's say your dopamine level will start at 0. You smoke weed, you spike your dopamine all the way up to like 60 or 70 or something like that. And then it crashes, it goes past 0 and it goes down to like -20, -30. So your dopamine levels are below baseline, and then it kind of like takes a bit of time for it to go back up to level 0. So the thing is, a lot of people don't wait for it to go back up to level 0. They smoke again to get their dopamine levels back to its natural baseline state. So that's why when you smoke weed and you have that come down, you feel as if you need to smoke again to kind of get that hype going back up. Because what's happening is your dopamine levels are super below baseline, so you don't feel good. You feel like shit. So you have to smoke again to get your dopamine levels back up to a normal, natural level. And then what happens after that, it drops again below that baseline that it was at before. This is really what happens. So when you keep doing that, what you're doing is you're artificially inducing that chemical within your brain. So when you artificially induce some sort of chemical in your brain stops naturally producing that thing. It's kind of like taking steroids or taking melatonin. When you take melatonin, you get kind of addicted to sleeping pills or melatonin. Your brain stops naturally producing the melatonin that help you fall asleep because your body already has it. Your body is used to getting it from an external source. So your brain stops producing it, so you can't fall asleep unless you have some sort of melatonin or sleeping pills to fall asleep. That's what happens. It's the same exact thing with dopamine. Your dopamine receptors become dull. Your brain stops naturally producing dopamines on things that you should get natural dopamine from. So going outside and getting sunlight, which is naturally supposed to give you dopamine, that doesn't give you dopamine anymore. Going to talk to someone, going to talk to friends or go out with friends or going up to talk to a girl or something like that, that's naturally supposed to give you dopamine, but it doesn't give you dopamine anymore because, like what I said, you've already naturally screwed up, or you already unnaturally fried your brain. Your brain's not producing that dopamine chemical anymore because it's used to getting it from weed. So what you have to do is you have to smoke weed for your brain to produce that dopamine. This is the exact reason why you need to smoke weed before you do anything. Before you go eat, you have to smoke weed. Before you go to the mall, you have to smoke weed. Before you, watch a movie, you have to smoke weed. This is the exact reason why, because your brain is not naturally going to produce the dopamine before you do that thing, so it's going to become boring. Now, what happens in your brain when you have low levels of dopamine? When you have low levels of dopamine in your brain, life just becomes dull. The exact same symptoms that I explained earlier in the beginning of this video. Your life becomes dull. You become emotionless. You kind of see no joy in things. You kind of lose the color out of life. It kind of seems like life is in a black and white state. There's not really any color to it or vibrance to it. That's exactly what happens when your brain doesn't produce normal dopamine, because you don't have the motivation to do anything. Dopamine is the chemical that's responsible for motivation as well. So you don't have any motivation to do anything. You don't have any motivation to get out of bed and then brush your teeth, which is also a symptom of depression. Not wanting to take care of yourself. A lot of people who are depressed, they don't brush their teeth. It's the same thing, though. It's literally the same exact thing when you smoke weed. When you have no dopamine in your brain, you're not going to be motivated to brush your teeth. You're not going to be motivated to take care of yourself. This is why stoners are the laziest people on the earth, because they don't have the dopamine in their brain to go and do things. They don't have the motivation to do things or ambition to do things because their brains are fried. So not even that, but also there's a chemical called serotonin that weed affects. Serotonin is known to regulate your mood. Serotonin is known to be that chemical in your brain that's kind of responsible for regulating your emotions or regulating your mood or putting you in a good mood and that sort of stuff. It's kind of like I guess you could say it's similar to dopamine, where it's a feel-good chemical, but dopamine kind of acts more on motivation. But yes, the serotonin levels in your brain end up getting screwed up as well. It's the same exact thing with dopamine. So what you're doing is you're jumbling up the chemistry in your brain whenever you smoke weed, and especially if you're smoking multiple times a day, every single day. This isn't good. So if you're screwing up the chemical that's responsible for emotional regulation, serotonin, what do you think is going to happen? What do you really think is going to happen? Do you think like you're just going to be normal? No, you're not going to be fucking normal. You're going to be depressed. You're going to feel like you're depressed. So what happens? A lot of people who smoke a lot of weed, they go to the doctors like, "Oh, I'm depressed," and they take antidepressants to screw up their brain chemistry even more. Like, think about that. You're just screwing yourself. You're basically just, you're banging yourself from the behind. I guess you could say you're banging yourself from the behind. That's exactly what you're doing when you're smoking weed. So you're kind of digging yourself in a deeper and a deeper and a deeper hole when the more you smoke. And then, like what I said, a lot of people, they'll go to the doctor, they'll go to the doctors and they get more chemicals that screw up their brain even more, and then they're in a deeper hole. It's craziness. This is the exact reason why it's so hard for people to quit weed, because they need that stimulus. They need that dopamine in their brain because their brain doesn't have any dopamine. So they feel as if whenever they quit, they just feel worse. And obviously, you're going to feel worse because your brain's addicted to that unnatural source of dopamine. It's addicted to the artificial source of dopamine that you're artificially inducing. So your brain doesn't have any dopamine in it unless you smoke weed. So that's why it's so hard for people to quit, because they don't have that source of dopamine while their brain is still regenerating. But this is the exact reason why you should quit, because over time, when you do quit, this is what happens. Your brain naturally kind of heals itself. Your brain fixes itself, so it starts to naturally produce dopamine again, but it takes some time. This is the exact reason why you should quit, because your brain is fried right now. So you need to get your brain to the level where it's actually normal again. So over time, when you quit, what happens is your dopamine level is stabilized, your serotonin level is stabilized, and then you feel normal again. You feel as if you could get joy from just normal things. You feel as if you can get joy from just the tiniest things. You kind of feel like a child again. When you're a child, you get joy from the smallest things. That's what you feel like again. Color gets back into your life. The earth, the world kind of seems like there's more color and vibrance to it. You kind of feel like you could get that dopamine spike just from being sober. So a lot of people who smoke a lot of weed, they forget what feeling sober actually feels like. And when you quit, and when you quit for a while, you feel good. And being sober becomes the new high. You no longer have to smoke weed before you go to the movies to enjoy the movie. You no longer have to smoke weed before you go to the restaurant to enjoy the restaurant. You don't have to smoke weed before social situations because you don't have the motivation to go talk to people because there's no dopamine in your brain. You could just go and talk to people if you really wanted to, because that's the thing that naturally gives you dopamine. If you treat your body how it's meant to be treated, it will work how it's supposed to work. A lot of people don't know this, but when your body is working at its natural state, that's what it's supposed to be like. That's what it's supposed to feel like. A lot of people aren't treating the body how it's supposed to be treated, so it affects their mind, it affects their brain, it affects their mood. A lot of people don't know what it feels like to operate at 100% normalcy, I guess you could say. Or me, I wouldn't even say I operate at 100% normalcy. I'll probably operate at maybe like 70% or something like that. Like, I'm not perfect, of course. Like, I'm not perfect. Maybe I could fix up my diet a bit more and that sort of stuff. Like, I'm not Brian Johnson. But when you operate at 100% normalcy, how your body's supposed to operate, you feel good. You feel as if you don't need anything else. You don't need any external sources to make you feel good or make you feel happy. You naturally feel how your body's supposed to feel. People who operate at like 100% normalcy is, I guess you could say, maybe kids, because their body is new, so it's still growing and regenerating. That I don't know the science behind it, but you could tell children that have the most amount of energy, the most amount of confidence, the most amount of everything, the most amount of vibrance, they feel as if everything is just a good time. You want to get to the point where you're operating like a child. You want to get to the point where you're operating like a kid, and smoking weed is not going to do that for you. It's going to make you operate like an old man. So right now, a lot of people are operating at such a low caliber, at like base. They're probably operating at like, I don't know, 10% normalcy or something like that, because they're smoking weed, eating junk food, doing things that aren't good for them, and they become just a dopamine fiend. When you smoke weed, you become a dopamine fiend because your brain doesn't produce it. So after you smoke weed, you're doing a bunch of things that are unnaturally gonna spike your dopamine. So that's exactly what happens. But anyways, like what I said before, if you treat your body how it's supposed to be treated, it will work how it's supposed to work. So you definitely need to consider quitting the gas now, because it's making you more depressed. Like, this is literally the reason why you feel depressed. I remember back when I was in high school, I wasn't actually depressed. I wouldn't say I was depressed, but maybe I had symptoms of it. But that's because I was smoking weed. Like, my mom would always come into my room and ask me, like, "Oh, are you okay? Are you feeling good?" My mom really thought I was depressed because I was just high all the time, and she didn't know I was smoking weed, so she didn't know any better. But yes, I wasn't depressed. I was really just high all the time, and my brain was just fried. So maybe you are depressed. Yeah, maybe you are actually depressed, but you're depressed because the weed gave you the depression, I guess you could say. But anyways, guys, if you experience this too, comment in the comment section below, because I'm actually curious on who experiences this too. I know a lot of people probably experience this, but I'm curious to hear your stories. But anyways, subscribe if you want to hear more about how to quit weed, how to stop smoking weed, and the downfalls or downsides of smoking weed, that sort of stuff. Like the video, that sort of stuff. All right, guys.